Yeah.
So, oh, yeah.
You are live.
Okay. All right. I'm Mike Anderson. I'm with Plastic Free Delaware and with the Aquarium Divers for Coral Society, and those two things sound like they're totally different.
My name is Neha Viragundam, and welcome to the 2021 Youth Environmental Summit session, The Crisis of Plastic Pollution in Our Environment. So before we get started, I'd like to remind our attendees that everyone is muted and with video off. Please use the comment feature to the right of the screen if you have any questions or want to share your comments. These will be monitored, so please no inappropriate language. There will also be a facilitated Q&A at the end of the session in which you can ask your questions in the comments and Mr. Anderson will answer them for you, so please save those until the end. If you have any questions throughout the session, jot them down and make sure to remember them. Also, feel free to use the reaction feature in the bottom bar if you hear a new idea, want to share, applause, or celebrate. And there's also a virtual etiquette guide that I will share with you now. So please do not access the grab the mic feature in the bottom corner until Mr. Anderson tells you can. And when speaking or commenting, please use appropriate language. And if you do get called onto the stage, please make sure that your background is appropriate and you speak clearly and politely. Due respect to Mr. Anderson by listening, and make sure to be considerate of everyone else in the section.
Somebody building something?
My mom's just cooking dinner. She's just having her fun. So, before we begin again, we'd like to thank our sponsors for their generous support of this year's conference. Make sure to check out their booths between sessions. So yes, those are our sponsors. They're lovely. And without further ado, I'm happy to introduce Mr. Anderson.
Okay. All right. Let me share my screen here. All right, like I said, Plastic Free Delaware and Aquarium Divers for Coral. Those are the two organizations that I work with. And our topic today is the crises of plastic in our environment. Those two words, environment and plastic, should not go together. Plastic is a man-made material. It's synthetic. It doesn't break down for an extremely long period of time. It's almost unidentifiable by nature itself. Humans have been around for some 200,000 years. We've been civilized for some 6,000 years. We've made a lot of different things over those 6,000 years. And most of those things are biodegradable. They will break down. Or they were rocks or stones, which were part of the environment in the first place. But not until 1950 did we really start coming up with chemicals from petroleum oil, and we made synthetics. So there's all these different types of materials we call plastic. And plastics are a fantastic material in that they're lightweight, they last a long time, they're almost indestructible. When you compare them to many other materials, they're now just as important as metal, glass, ceramics, cotton. Those are the materials that we used to make things out of all the time, and plastic has replaced a lot of those parts, a lot of those materials. They're now used to make a lot of the parts for cars, for example. A lot of our furniture is plastic. If you look around the room that you're sitting in, there's probably a tremendous amount of plastic within your reach. Or just by looking around the room. There could be a lampshade, it could be whatever, right? Some of these plastics most plastics are essential to our way of life today, but there's the downside to it in that the things that we like about it, the fact that it's indestructible, the fact that it lasts a long time, the fact that it's inexpensive, durable, all those things we like about it are the negative things also, because it makes it impossible for the environment to take them back, right? Right now, and we're in COVID, and if it wasn't for plastic, we'd be losing a lot more people because plastic has become a fantastic material to create a barrier between us and bacteria or virus in this case. And we have suits that are plastic, gloves that are plastic. See this right here? I live right behind Christianic Hospital in Wilmington. And I know that from talking to some of the people that work there, that they go through about 7,000 gloves a day, right? Single use, and they end up in landfills, right? But it's a necessity, okay? Can we do something about that? Right now, there isn't much that we can do about it. We're thankful just to have it, right? One of the downsides to plastic, besides the fact that it can be so useful, is that it ends up in our environment. I live along the Brandywine Creek. It's 2 blocks from my house. And when I walk down there, there's a lot of things that you don't want to see. But if you look for them, you find them. Plastic bags, plastic, all different forms of plastic. The bags are the easiest to spot because they blow around, get stuck in the trees. A lot of this stuff ends up going into the creek, the Brandywine Creek, and from there it goes down into the Christina River, from the Christina River into the Delaware River, and within days it can end up in the Atlantic Ocean. So how long has plastic been around? Well, plastic was invented around 1900, but it didn't really make any impact until it was like 1 or 2 different types of plastic. Bakelite was one of them. But it wasn't until the 1950s that we figured out how to make many different types of plastics. They fall into 2 categories, thermosetting plastics and thermoplastics. Thermosetting plastics are plastics that once they are chemically made, they cannot be on-made. You can't melt them down. You can't reuse them. You can use, if you made a container out of it, you could reuse the container, but you couldn't take that container and grind it up and make it into something else. It's permanently changed. It's gone through a chemical change and it can't be reversed. Thermoplastics, on the other hand, they all melt. So they I'll have a soap container here. You can see, right? This is polyethylene. You can take this polyethylene and at about 300 degrees, it'll be liquefied. Right? We can take plastic soda bottle, right? We can take that. It'll melt down. A lot of these different types of plastics, but the problem is once they are melted down to be made into something else, they all melt at about the same temperature. So now you end up with no way of really separating them from each other. So when we recycle, like in Delaware, we have the materials processing plant, which we use for recycling our plastics. And what happens is it all gets melted down or ground up and it's all the same. Even though you have different types of plastics, they're now all combined. So you can't use them to make a new soda bottle or a new container like this because you don't know if it's what types of plastics you have mixed together. So what we will do is we'll make things like composite materials like decking, so that instead of using wood, we use composite material made out of plastic that can be used to build decks or picnic benches or benches for parks, things like that. But everyone likes that idea. The problem with it is that the plastic is still with us. We're reusing it, but we're not getting rid of it. And every year we're still making about 330 million tons of plastic a year, and it increases every year. So we're not getting rid of it. Some of it we can reuse, right? But we're reusing it in a way that doesn't replace, like we're not reusing it to make new bottles. We're reusing it to make something else. So we're reducing the amount of wood that we're using to make a deck, but we're not using it for reducing the amount of plastic that we've been producing. So it's a never-ending thing. Almost all the plastic that has ever been made, which the majority of that's been since 1950. So in one generation, we've created all this plastic and it's still with us. So the toys that I played with as a little kid, who knows where they are now, but we know that they're still in the environment. Okay? Are there materials that can replace that? Yes, there are some. For example, we have this recyclable, not even recyclable, disposable, biodegradable cups that can be used for instead of the styrofoam coffee cups. This still insulates, keeps the heat in, like the styrofoam would. Doesn't burn your hand when you put the hot coffee into the container. You can put a lid on it. You can still have it. You can drink through it. This, you use it, throw it out, it breaks down in the landfill. The styrofoam does not. It's going to be around for some 750 years. Okay? So is there something replaceable? Yes. This cost more to make than the styrofoam cup. So this is not very marketable right now. Another one is the styrofoam containers that you take food home from the store, not from the restaurants with, the takeout. Well, there are replaceables for that, and that's this. This is a paper product. The food does not leak through it. It's not lined. Some of them are lined with plastic. This is not lined with plastic. This is, you can throw this out and it breaks down in the environment. So it goes into a landfill, it will break down. Now, the problem is that the styrofoam containers, you get a box of those, it's approximately $15. You get a box of these for the same quantity of containers. You get a box of these, it's $45. So most restaurants are going to go with the cheaper one because it's more profitable for them to do that. So it's not until you have enough restaurants that are making enough money that they can splurge a little bit on buying these. The more that do that, the more this is made, the cheaper it will become, and it will could replace the styrofoam containers. There's another little catch. Right now, this is not made in the United States. It's too expensive to make it here. It's made in China. It's actually cheaper to make there and ship it here and market it here than to make it here. There's another little problem. The oil companies and the plastic industry has a way of buying out their competitors. So if something is a threat to them, they can buy it out and it's gone. Okay? All right. What are some of the other impacts? Excuse me. So what are some of the other impacts? Well, what I'd like to do is dive into the ocean for a moment. Right? This is Florida. Right? This is the Caribbean Sea. This is the Atlantic out here. This is the Caribbean Sea. So there's Florida. I'm going to show you some pictures from Florida. I'm going to show you some pictures from this little island down here called Bonaire. The reason I pick on Bonaire is I love it. It's a fantastic place. It's small. You can drive around the whole island in one day. But there's something amazing about it. That island has almost no natural resources. It doesn't even have its own water supply naturally. It doesn't have a well, right? So they have to take the seawater and desalinate it so that it's now just fresh water. All their oil, they have to, for heating or cooking, they have to import. All their propane, they have to import. To make their electricity, they were burning oil. So now they've converted. They've gotten serious about the fact that they can't recycle anything on the island. It's not big enough. So they have now creating a lot of their electricity using wind generation and solar energy. They've almost overnight outlawed plastic, single-use plastics. So there are no bags in the store, no paper bags, no plastic bags. You have to bring your own bag, or you can take a box and put your groceries in the box and take it home that way. There are no plastic utensils on the island. The restaurants cannot serve plastic. They cannot buy it. They can't serve with plastic. They can't use plastic glass, not plastic drinking containers. They can't use that. They have to use glass, all right, or ceramic, coffee cups. They've moved away from plastic entirely. It's a small island. Everything that they have has to be imported. So it's easy to control that. In the United States, it's going to take us a lot longer. I mean, they're a perfect example of what can be done, but for the United States to try and do that, it's going to take a long time, but it's being done there. All right. This is a very healthy reef, coral reef. Coral reefs make up about 1% of the entire ocean worldwide. That 1% supports the ecosystem of the ocean. If the coral reefs die, the ocean dies. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, but you can check that out for yourself. So the whole cycle, it's like you break that chain in that cycle for the coral reef, and the ocean's going to die. Right? So this is a healthy reef. The bubbles you hear is me breathing. Okay, you can see that these are coral formations right here. All different kinds of corals. It's hard corals, soft corals. Soft corals are the ones that move in the current. Hard corals are the ones that are like stone. They call them stony corals. There's different types. Like over here, you see a brain coral. Right there, you see it. It's not a coral. It's a moray eel, green moray eel. Okay, let me move ahead here. In this case here, this is an island, different part of the island, which has been affected by, this is dead. The coral has died. What's killing the coral is the CO2 that's in the atmosphere that's heating up the planet, right? And the ocean temperature rises. When the ocean temperature rises, coral dies off at about 86 degrees, and the oceans are now getting a lot warmer. So what's happening in this case here is they bleached out, and what you're looking at is the skeleton of the coral that once was. They have a skeleton just like we have. Coral are animals; they're not plants; they're animals, right? So the bones that we have is our skeleton. This is what you're looking at here is the skeleton of coral. It has died out. It's died out because the water temperature is too high, because the CO2 in the atmosphere has heated up the ocean. It has also acidified the ocean by it. When it rains, that CO2 comes down, mixes with the salt water, and you get an acidification of the water. It becomes more acid, right? So about what you're looking at here are staghorn corals, dead brain coral. They've died because the temperature or the acidity has killed them off. And part of what's made that happen is the oil companies, by burning fossil fuels to make plastic, to make gasoline, goes into our atmosphere. So that's the connection between what you're looking at here and plastic, right? Here's a piece of staghorn coral that's healthy. Here's one that's bleached out. So it means there's the algae that grows on the coral is how the coral lives. When the coral gets too hot, it expels the algae, gets rid of the algae to cool itself off, but then it starves to death because the algae feeds off of the coral and the coral feeds off of the algae. All right. It could be the most pristine coral reef in the world, which Bonaire is one of those, and you will find plastic pollution on the bottom. Here's a tire. This tire, when I come up close to it, from the design of the tire, you can tell that tire was about at least 40 years old. So I would guess it might have been sitting in the ocean now for 30 years or so. Nothing grows on it because the plastic that's used to make and the rubber that's used to make tires are synthetic. They leach chemicals, so nothing grows on the tire. It'll grow around the tire, but it won't grow on the tire. So the tire sits there, and it's going to be there for hundreds of years before it breaks down. But in the 1970s, late 1970s, there were some people that came up with a fantastic idea of taking these tires, and this is now off the coast of Florida. This is off of, if you've ever been to Florida, there's north of Miami, there's Miami, Hollywood, Florida. Hollywood, Florida, back in the 70s, what they did, they came up with this fantastic idea of taking all the used tires, dumping them about a quarter of a mile to a half a mile offshore to make what's called, what they were hoping would be an artificial reef. Didn't work because the coral won't grow on the tires. So they've, around 2010 is they started figuring out that they have to take these tires out of the ocean because they're now in storms. They're finding them spread out all over the ocean floor, and as they move around, they are destroying the good coral that's there. All right, so they've got to get it out of the ocean. All right, now when plastic gets into the ocean, it comes down the rivers and the streams and the rivers and works its way in. A lot of landfills are built along rivers so that things could be moved back and forth to get them to landfills, right? So you have worldwide people living along rivers. People in some places just throw their trash into the rivers in some countries. Other countries, it gets there accidentally or carelessly, and it eventually ends up in the ocean. The ocean has currents. So what happens is now you have these currents. So what's happened is we have now 6 garbage patches in the oceans. We have the East Pacific, the Western Pacific, the Indian, the South Atlantic, North Atlantic, South Pacific. And there's a small one in the Caribbean also. It's not mentioned here. Now, these will follow the current. So what happens is it spirals. And this is thousands of miles wide. Can you walk on it? No. Some parts of it, you can't, the plastic is broken up to where you can't really, you can see it. Some of it, you can screen the ocean and pick it up that way, like microplastics, you can pick up that way. Some of them you can actually see. And what happens is when it gets close to the shoreline, it then impacts the California, the Northeast, the Northwestern shorelines of the United States. In the United States, we can clean up our shoreline. We can afford to do that. We have landfills that we can put it into and hide it. All right. In this Western Pacific, this one spins around and hits a lot of islands in the South Pacific, not South Pacific, in the like Indonesia, that area. And a lot of these islands have no way of getting rid of the plastic when it washes up. So you have some this if you want. But they found that rather than burning the wood on the island, you can burn a plastic soda bottle, and it could be raining and it'll burn. It burns at the same temperature. And when the when the scientists are talking to these people saying you can't do this because of the toxic fumes, the answer is, oh, you get used to it after a while. But it's great for cooking, and it gets rid of the plastic trash that blows up on the shoreline. Right? We don't have to spend a lot of time talking about how ridiculous that is, but it is what it is. This right here is part of the North Pacific, Eastern Pacific garbage patch. This is looking south. This is California off to the side. This is in 2020 2019. where part of the garbage patch broke away, and it's about a 6-mile long stretch, and it was threatening the coast of California, and they were deciding whether they should try and go out there and pick it up before it gets to the coastline or let it hit the coastline. So it turned out to be a combination of both. But this can show you what the garbage patches can look like, right? We'll skip that. Well, this is just all these little red dots indicate the coral reefs in the world, making up 1% of the entire ocean. And by the way, almost 40% of that 1% is now dead. I did a tour. It was like a 8-hour or whatever tour with full day tour with the University of the Atlantic up in the Gulf of Maine. This is like 2019, and we were out there to look at the conditions of the ocean. We were out there to look at the lobster fishing that goes on, and the whales, and the birds that live at sea, and the plastic pollution. And it was amazing. It was a large boat that we were out on, and they would stop to pick up every piece of plastic that we found. So in that time, the boat must have stopped a good 20 times. In this case here, they were stopping to hook they already brought it up by the time I got my camera ready, a happy birthday balloon, right? That is now floating in the ocean 25 miles offshore. When people do these balloon releases, whether they're to celebrate something, they do it a lot for funerals. You see it on the news where in order to honor a person that died, they release 100 balloons into the sky. When you live on the East Coast of the United States and you release 100 balloons into the sky, you can sort of guess where they're going to go. They're going to be out in the ocean, right? So when they get up in too high an elevation and they eventually pop and they drop down, they land in the ocean. Another one is a lot of plastic ends up being ingested by animals, mistaking it for food. Here's a whale that washed up on shore. Its belly was full of plastic. It starved to death because it couldn't eat anymore. All right. In the 1970s, they came up with this fantastic concept of, rather than having to pack tractor trailers at the factory, it was, packing stuff into the tractor trailer, and then the tractor trailer goes to the shipyard or to the train yard, and they have to unpack it and put it into freight cars, and then take it to wherever the freight car is going and unpack it again. Someone came up with the idea of shipping containers. So a lot of you have grown up seeing these shipping containers. You can see them; they're everywhere. In these shipping containers, the factory just packs the shipping container, then they put it on the back of a tractor trailer. It takes it to the ship or to the train yard. It's picked up with a crane, picked up and placed on the ship, and it can go anywhere in the world. And it doesn't have to get unpacked until it's at its final destination. It's a tremendous savings in transporting products around the world. But there's a downside to them. And this is a picture of one where there's a storm, where the one boat runs into another boat, or there just happens to be that it runs aground and the boat tips over and the chains break and it falls into the ocean, right? We lose approximately 10,000 shipping containers a year in the ocean, And the companies that own them and own the products that are in them just write them off of taxes. It's a loss. But at the same time, it's an environmental impact. In that shipping container, you have everything from synthetic resins that are used to make plastic to household chemicals, tires, toys, industrial chemicals, anything that's manufactured that you want to ship somewhere else in the world, shipping containers take it there. So that's a major thing. And when some of these shipping containers break loose and wash up on shore and break open, they leave quite a bit of mess behind. And sometimes the company whose product was in the container will be good enough to come and clean up the mess made by that. But lots of times it just ends up staying, or the local area has to try and deal with it itself. This is Manila. This is the country of Manila. And it happens that the currents there in the Pacific swirl just right so that it takes the plastic and just washes it up on their beaches. So once a year, they voluntarily go in, clean up the beaches, and take it to a landfill. All right. Plastic is also getting now into our food chain because the ocean, when it beats up the plastic and it starts, the sun bakes it and it breaks down and breaks up into little pieces, we call them microplastics. They float on the surface or they fall to the ocean floor. I know that I'm an aquarium diver. I work at one of the aquariums. And one of the jobs that we've had is to help prep the food for because fish eat fish. So we prep food, cut up frozen fish to feed to the other fish. And lots of times when you cut this fish up, you find pieces of fishing net, especially in squid. You find pieces of fishing net inside the squid. So it ends up in our food chain. Let me back up here. Some things, like a lot of things, will float on the surface and they get mistaken as food by the animals that live in the ocean. A plastic bag takes about 20 years to break down. So if you have a bag like this, you're going to recognize the symbol on it. You know where this one came from, right? This will take about 20 years to break down. It doesn't really break down. It turns into microplastics. Now, in Delaware, we came out with a bag law, which just took effect just January 1st. And we outlawed bags for the larger stores. They can't use plastic bags. And they came up with the standards of up to a certain thickness, about like trash bags, the heavy duty trash bags. They are a very important part of waste management, as far as like people putting their trash in there, their household trash in there, and it helps contain it so that it's not spread around the environment. It also reduces the amount of rodents. It's a necessity. So the bag bill left out really thick bags and only outlawed the thinner bags. So if you've been to the store in the last month, you have found this. You can even hear it. It's a lot thicker than this. It's 4 times thicker. It's the thickness of a trash bag, heavy-duty trash bag, right? And they put on there that it is recyclable, reusable, right? Supposedly you can use it 125 times. There's a little problem. These original trash bags, or these original plastic bags, were supposed to be all brought back to the store, which they came from. Only about a little less than 10% of those bags actually make it back to the store. So now we have a bag that's 4 times the thickness. It's still going to be 10% because there's no motivation. Why take this back to the store? Just get a new one, right? So you end up with problem is now with the new thicker bags, 4 times the pollution that we were getting from the thinner bags. Another problem when you talk to people, because it says on there that it's recyclable, reusable, and everything, people go, it's recyclable. They think they can put this in the recycle container for their plastic. You can't. This cannot go in the recycle bin for your house, for curbside pickup. It can't, because the material processing plant, MRF, can't handle this. This clogs up the whole system. It can't handle sheet plastic. So it can't handle that. It can't handle the plastic gloves. It can't handle the plastic that's put into like the Amazon packaging when you buy something, those bubble things, the bubble wrap type stuff. It can't handle that. And Delaware is only one of the few states that recycles its plastic. Most of the country, now that China doesn't take our plastic waste anymore, most of it goes to landfills. And now that's not working too well. So what's happened now is they're now shipping to third world countries saying that they can make money recycling our plastic. The reality is it's just filling up their country with our plastic because they really can't make any money out of it. So if you Google it, you see these little islands and third world countries with mounds of plastic that they have no way of getting rid of. And we're still taking it to them. Some of the countries, like in Africa, have stopped it also. They won't allow it anymore. So we need to be able to have some solutions to our plastic. We need to be able to reuse it. We need to be able to recycle it. We need to be able to reduce the amount of plastic that we use. All right. So looking in the ocean here again, you have your plastic containers, your microplastics, straws. Okay. Now, I'll use my neighborhood for example. It was either last winter or the winter before. It's around Christmas time. My neighbor takes all the packages that they get from Amazon. They took all the packing peanuts out and they put them in their trash container. It can't go in recycling, so they put it in the regular trash. Well, we had a storm. The wind blows over the trash can. The trash, now the styrofoam peanuts are blowing around. Some of them it's raining, so some of them get washed down the storm sewer. We're 2 blocks away from the Christina River, so the packing peanuts end up coming out and floating down the river. So, or down the Christina, not the Christina, sorry, the Brandywine Creek, and then into the Christina River. So, and ends up in the ocean. So that's a simple example that happens all over the world and how plastics get to the ocean. Right? This is one day where I ended up with a little, one of those little hand gripper things that take things off of shelves, and I went down along the park and just picked up in a 2-block period, filled up a bag with plastic that I found along the creek. It just happens that a lot of it is stuff that would come from restaurants because there's a lot of restaurants right around me. This is the Christina River Creek, which is 2 blocks away from my house. Gorgeous, but if you look carefully, you will find out that plastic is floating along. An example here is this little barrel. We had a storm. This barrel is just on its way to the ocean. Might take a month to get there. It might get stuck along the way on the banks of another, along one of the other rivers, the Delaware possibly, and then another storm will come along and it'll wash and go down the rest of the way unless someone intervenes and pulls it out. You saw that wall. I couldn't get down to do anything for that, so it's on its way. It's on its way. All right. Now, what they found is that one of the best ways, this is what they're developing now, one of the best ways to try and prevent plastic from getting to the ocean is to get it in the marsh areas, in the low-lying areas of rivers. You can have local municipalities work at cleaning up their sections of the river, their coastline of the river, their banks of the river, and get it to recycle or to get it to landfills, rather than having it go all the way out to the ocean, where it becomes, a much bigger environmental problem. Becomes for the animals, for the ocean. It becomes a lot larger problem for trying to clean it up. Clean up in the ocean is monumental. All right. In the production of plastics, you end up with CO2 in the atmosphere because you're burning fossil fuels. Some countries do not use filters, not filters, but scrubbers on their smokestacks of their factories. And in the United States, we do. So we really reduce the amount of CO2 that's going up into the atmosphere from the production of oil, but it still gets there. And then when they empty out the scrubbers, it goes to landfills. So, but then you have other countries that just burn it, let it go into the atmosphere. You have a lot of countries that burn coal for electricity and they don't scrub it. They just old school factories that just let it go out. Okay, that one we don't need. Back to the ocean, right? When a lot of the reefs are dying, one of the ways that we do coral restoration is to create nurseries where you grow the coral. And then when the coral gets to a large enough size, you then take this coral and what they call outplant it, put it back into the environment. And coral restoration is what it's called. And the purpose is to stabilize the coral reefs around the world. So you have many countries now involved in coral restoration. Coral restoration is not a solution. It just buys time. We cannot keep up with the death rate of coral. It's humanly impossible. But we can help stabilize it and sustain it to last longer, buying us time to reduce our carbon imprint, or the carbon that we're releasing into the atmosphere. Because if we can do that, if we can keep the coral going long enough for the world to catch on and finally reduce its carbon output, that the coral will recover on its own, right? But if we kill it all off, they're actually freezing the sperm and eggs of coral in different places of the world, so that if we actually wipe out all the coral and we eventually bring our carbon levels in the atmosphere down, that we will have frozen eggs and sperm to fertilize and start coral all over again. But that's we don't want to go there. We don't want to go there. But it's being saved as an option if we can't control our carbon output. Doing coral restoration is time consuming because those things that were floating in the water are called coral trees. So what you do is you have to manually hang each piece of coral. This is a staghorn coral. Hang each piece of coral off of the tree, and you have to keep the algae from growing. There's bad algae and there's good algae. You have to keep the bad algae from growing onto the coral and killing it. So you constantly have to maintain these trees until the fragments, these are coral fragments that were taken from a healthy coral that was in the ocean. You cut pieces off, you grow it, and when you cut them, they grow almost 20 times faster than they would if you grew them from an egg and sperm fertilizing them. So in this case here, you can now get this coral in 9 months from being a fragment to where you can outplant it. This is the coral. This is staghorn coral when it's outplanted. Staghorn and elkhorn coral are the two biggest corals that are being grown in nurseries because they're fast, and they were very prevalent in Florida. They were extremely prevalent. Now it's hard to find. So through most of what you see there now is from coral restoration. This is a brain coral because it's got the shape like a brain there, But this one is about 3 feet wide, about 4 foot tall, and about 500 years old. So coral, a lot of your stony corals, they call them. This is one type of stony coral, brain coral. It's not something that you can just plant and it'll grow back quickly. This takes 500 years, and you can kill it out in a year. That's tough. All right. We've got the whole world. All right. We are the keepers of this world. It is up to us to protect the environment. We need the environment. The earth does not need us. We need the earth. That's a fact. We're not getting on a rocket ship and going to another planet to go and live. I mean, we just sent a rover to Mars. Doesn't look like a place that I would like to live, and that would be one of the closest places that we could go. There's another planet that's 25, I forget how far away it is. That looks like it's similar to Earth, other than it's a little bit smaller. And people are figuring that maybe one day we could go there. Do you ever think this maybe somebody's already there? Okay. If the planet is very much like ours, there's a good chance that there's life there like ours, right? Okay. So what can you do about this right now? What can we do on a daily basis? It seems really simple. Bring your own bag. Go to the store, you bring your own bag. A reusable bag, not the plastic bag, right? Refuse those bags. Bring your own bag. Some states now have it where you can bring back your bottles. You can bring back your plastic bottles. You put them into the machine. It grinds them up. Gives you a receipt for it. When you go into the supermarket, you can use the receipt to help buy your to reduce the cost of the groceries that you're buying in the supermarket. This is something that should be done worldwide because we're not going to be getting rid of the plastic anytime soon. So we need to be able to reuse it or recycle it. Why should you refuse plastic straws? A straw, this happens to be a biodegradable straw. It's made out of paper with a coating on it so that it can last in hot drinks and it can last in soda or whatever. And totally biodegradable. The plastic straws, we make enough straws every year to wrap around the earth several times. And we don't need them. How many people use straws at home? Not very many, right? But when we go to the restaurant, all of a sudden we want to use a straw. And when I've asked people, why are you using straws? Because it's nice. I don't want the ice to touch my teeth. Well, how do you do it at home? Well, that's different. How's it different, right? Or they go to the restaurant and they say, I don't want my lips touching the glass. You don't want your lips touching the glass, but you'll drink what's in the glass? Try to make sense out of that for me, all right? We don't need the straws. If you really need a straw, you can bring your own straw. You have metal straws that you can put in a purse or you can put it in your pocket, and you can use your own straw, bring your own straw that's reusable over and over again, right? All right. There's other things that we can do, like liquid soaps. Instead of using liquid soaps in the plastic container, you can use bar soap. A lot of people prefer the liquid soap. It's not as messy, but you don't have that plastic that you always have to have, right? Support the bag bill. Bring your own bags to the store. When it comes to things like the Clorox wipes, the sanitary wipes, those are plastic. They're synthetic. You can't put them in the trash. You can't put them in recycling. You cannot put them in the toilet. In New York City, those like Clorox wipes, constantly people throw them in the toilets, flush them in the toilets, and they end up clogging up the sewer system. Not only the sewer system, but the water treatment plants, the waste where they sewer treatment plants. Sorry, the sewer treatment plants. It clogs them up. New York City, they've had to make a device that will catch them so they can be put into landfills because they clog up the system. The plastic trash bags, when they go or the plastic bags like these, when they're in the street. In Wilmington, they end up in the sewer system, getting blown down the storm sewers. And they the city talks about how much money it spends every year just to get those out of the so just by not using the plastic bags, right? Balloons, releasing balloons, don't do those. Clothing, for example. Anyone know what I'm looking at right here? This is dryer lint, okay? A lot of people don't even think about it. But this right here, this dryer lint, is probably 90% plastic. If your clothing says polyester, acrylon, acrylic, nylon, and the list goes on, those are all plastics. If it says cotton or wool, that's natural, right? Now, the discussion now is not only are people talking about microplastics entering the ocean, they're now talking about nanoplastics entering the ocean. And where do most of the nanoplastics come from? They come from washing machines because the fibers break up. The washing machines doesn't have any filters on them. They go down the drain. They're too small to be caught in the sewer system or in the waste management system. They can't, so they go right out to the ocean. What can you do about that? Well, you can look at the content of the clothing, but we're sort of locked into that. It's hard to get away from that. Right. There's other things that you can do as far as like ditching, stop using plastic food wrap, the plastic Ziploc bags. There's alternatives to those. Okay. All right. If we have, sorry, I just want to close this out. We have questions.
Yeah. So I guess thank you very much for your great and insightful presentation, Mike. And with we're a bit short on time, but anybody has any questions, and they can type them in the chat, or if they feel comfortable coming up and speaking their question, you can request the mic.
Well, I hope that some of the information is food for thought. Some of the challenges that are out there are not just challenges for today. They're going to be challenges for generations to come. And some of you may want to build a career in coming up with alternatives to plastic. Some of you may want to get into environmental issues in protecting the environment. It's going to become a bigger and bigger thing. Everything from how we generate our electricity to how we power our cars to every aspect of life is going to be impacted. And people are going to have to move away from fossil fuels. I mean, we are dependent upon the technology. Just look at Texas. Look at what's happening to Texas right now, right? And we talk about Texas and we talk about alternative energy. A lot of alternative energy is built in areas where you don't have to worry about winter conditions, where your wind generators don't freeze and your solar panels don't get covered with snow and ice. And people didn't think that that's something that would happen in Texas, but it's been happening. Weather patterns are changing due to climate change. Anyone have anything they want to add? Well, as far as the El Nino, I don't know. The plastics getting into the ocean. A lot of the plastic gets into the ocean. I'm just answering someone's question up there. A lot of the plastics get into the ocean from wind, things being blown towards the water, especially if you live where you're near a river or near the ocean, and you end up with. I don't know if you can blame it directly on those two cycles. I don't know. I'm sorry, I can't really say that for a fact, but I know that wind is a big factor in blowing. What you have to do is drive down the highway, drive down 95, or in some states like in Maryland along 13, and some places look like someone blew up a trash truck. I mean, the plastics in the trees, it's in the median strip between the northbound and southbound lanes. It's like, what are they stop picking up the trash down there or what? It's kind of a mess. And the same thing along 295 up in New Jersey, parts of 295 looks like a trash truck exploded. And it's just natural occurrence because of how the rain washes things down and how people throw trash out and stuff like that. People are just going to have to become more aware.
All right. I guess since we're wrapping up, I just like to remind everyone that for all of our every single Yes workshop, at the end we have a raffle for a prize, and the winner of this session's raffle is Rose. So congratulations. And I would also like to remind everyone about the Yes sponsor scavenger hunt, where you can win prizes like gift cards. And I'll post a link to the scavenger hunt form right now in the chat. And Rose, could you type out your email in the chat so we can contact you? And besides that, I would just like once again thank Mike for his amazing presentation, and thank you. I guess once again, thank you for our sponsors, and they'll be on the screen right now. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you tomorrow or whenever else this week you have time.
I enjoyed this. It would have been would have been nice to see everyone's faces, but the work was in the message. Thank you.